Hey everyone, welcome back to The Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. Our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We bring you weekly topics and thought-provoking guests to get you to stop, reflect, and think about what it means to be a leader in a modern world. Our aim is to help you become the leader you wish you always had, as we learn together and lead together. Today's episode is brought to you by my new book, You're a Leader, Now What? The Proven Path to High-Performance Leadership. The book contains many of the great lessons that we've been learning together during the Leadership Project podcast, together with many other lessons that I've collected over my 30-year career as a leader. The book is aimed at first-time leaders, but really there's lessons in there for everyone. It would be greatly appreciated if you could go and grab your copy on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback, and if you could leave us an honest review on Amazon. Now, on with the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honored today to be joined by Michelle Bowden. Michelle is a persuasive presentation skills master. She is the director of Michelle Bowden Enterprises, a keynote speaker, and the best-selling author of a book called How to Persuade and How to Present. So this is not just about presentation skills. It's how to persuade people in a meaningful way. And we're going to go deep into that as we go through today's discussion. I'm really excited. I think you all know in the audience that this is one of my favorite topics amongst other things. So I'm really excited to learn some new things here, for my mind to be expanded, for your mind to be expanded. So pay attention, listen up, and let's hear from an expert. So Michelle, without any further ado, please do say hello to our audience and tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to be with us today.
So great to meet you, Mick, and thank you everyone for listening today. My background is fairly straightforward. I came out of university, ended up becoming a trainer. Then I turned into a presentation skills trainer, and then I specialised in the niche within the niche, which is persuasive presenting in business. I've run my own company for over 23 years. I run a 2-day masterclass called Persuasive Presentation Skills every week of the year and have done for those 23 years. So that's really my main activity that I do in the business. I also coach executives and celebrities for the stage. So when someone's got a really important speech they're delivering, like a road show, or maybe they're pitching for business or something like that, they might come to me, work out what they want to say, then how should they say it, and then we might practice the rehearsal and the delivery of that before the big event. And I also work with big pitch teams. Some of my clients are trying to win $500, $700 million deals. And in those pitch teams, there's somewhere like 20, 25, 27 people in a pitch team. And I would work with all of those individual people individually and together, so that when they are all pitching their part of the big deal, they all come together and they seem a cohesive unit that the client is excited to purchase. And I'm also a mum. I have 3 kids. I have 3 daughters, aged 23, 20 and 17, 1 husband and 2 Labradoodles.
That could be the interesting part of the conversation. 3 kids to do the dishes and make their bed and all that kind of stuff. That could be a podcast all on its own.
That's the thing, all the skills that I've learned have definitely helped me to get the slave labor happening in my family.
Very good. So tell me, how do you land in that though? So clearly you've been doing it for 23 years, I think you said. You've been doing it for 23 years now. What lights your fire about all of this work?
Oh, I love helping people is the absolute answer to that question. I knew when I was working, my first corporate job really was with a company in Australia called Lend-Lease. And it was when Lend-Lease owned a financial services business. I worked for MLC, which was like a superannuation company. And I realised after about 3 months in that job, I was straight out of university, and I was young, and I wanted to be successful fast, but I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I did an arts degree at uni, so that wasn't much help. I didn't really know where that was going to lead me. So I think I was sitting at my desk for those first 3 months at Lend-Lease and thinking to myself, oh, look, this isn't it. So I noticed that people were coming to me and asking me how to use their computers. And I was helping them. This is back in the days, Mick, honestly. Do you remember Word Perfect?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Some of the listeners will be way too young.
You're aging both of us, by the way. But
Some of the listeners will be way too young to remember Word Perfect. It was this DOS-based word processing package, and it wasn't intuitive at all. So you had to know what keystrokes to make to bold text or underline text or make a new paragraph and all the basics that we just take for granted now in these days. And people would come to me and they'd say, how do you do this on the computer? And I realised I had quite a knack for training people. So I put a proposal at the age of 22. I put a proposal together for the bosses at the company at MLC, and I said to them, I think we need a training department. I'd love to be a trainer. You're going to have to hire me a boss because I don't know how to do any of this, but I'm really keen. I really want to learn. I really want to contribute. And by the way, why don't you also pay for me to go off and do my Masters of Adult Education so I'm a properly qualified adult educator? And they unbelievably accepted my proposal and said, okay, got me a boss, paid for my uni, and off I went. And the rest is history. So I think when I was very young, I was a ballet dancer. I was in the Canberra Youth Ballet Company, and I did want to be in the Australian Ballet. And I hurt my ankle and I couldn't dance anymore. So I think I was always destined to be on the stage. And then that moment at Lend-Lease where I put together that proposal and they approved it, that was my next moment really to be on a stage and training others. And then, of course, I became a keynote speaker as well. So I'm on the stage doing that too. And yes, I think, how do you fall into it? I've just been very good. And I think this all comes down to why I wrote a book called How to Persuade. I've always been very good at noticing when things were getting a bit stale or a bit beige and thinking, something's not working here. I'm not feeling really joyful about this. What have I got to change or learn, or who have I got to meet, or what have I got to do to shake things up a little bit and move myself forwards? And that writing that proposal, I mean, just think of the gumption of me at the age of 22 putting a proposal to the senior managers saying, this is what I think. I can't even believe that I was that arrogant. But they loved my proposal and they did it, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm gonna pivot the word arrogant for a moment, because there's 5 words that come to my mind when I hear this. I hear the intersection of passion with purpose. So for you, purpose was emerging very early. A lot of people, it doesn't emerge until much later. I'm then hearing confidence, not arrogance, and I'm hearing courage, and then I'm hearing your first foray into persuasion. So you're persuading people at the age of 23 to give you this opportunity to send you on a Masters of Communication and adult education, and then off you go. Well done, you. So the lesson I want to share with the audience there, for people that are out there sitting in the job where purpose is not being evident for you, first have a look around where you are, because purpose can emerge in amazing places. But if you want to make something happen, you need the confidence and courage to go out and ask. What's your reflection on that, Michelle?
Absolutely. Well, it's one of the main mistakes that we make when we're persuading, is that we forget to ask for what we want. We assume that the audience can read our mind. And some years back, I talked to this very wise family therapist who said to me at the time, she said, Michelle, men can't read your mind. And as you well know, Mick, it's not just men that can't read your mind. No one can read your mind. Your children can't read your mind. Your manager can't read your mind. Neither can your clients, your friends, your family, your partner, whoever it is. No one can read your mind. So the call to action is one of the most important things, I think, in communication. If you're just talking for the sake of talking with no actual outcome, then let's not talk anymore. Let's stop having so many meetings that are wasting everyone's time, including yours. Let's call our audience to action. And, you know, it's interesting. It's one of the parts of the analysis process in a good business presentation or pitch. And when I'm working with audience members, I've trained over 12,000 people in my formulas. And When I'm working with people and I say to them, what's your call to action? They stare at me blankly, like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's no point presenting this if you're not sure what you want the person to do differently when it's over. Most people, it is a revelation that they not only should have that in their own mind, but that they should have the courage to say it to the stakeholder. So yes, we must ask the person what we want, because otherwise they don't know, because they can't read our mind. And it needs to be very clear and explicit. I even say sometimes blunt. It needs to be blunt. And by the time you get to the call to action in a pitch, you should have built such good rapport that you can say things bluntly without breaking rapport. And then the person themselves should get the sense that there's a yes-no response to that. Either yes, I will, or no, I will not. And if you haven't asked it bluntly enough for them to give you either the yes or the no, then you probably haven't asked right.
I think we're already getting into amazing territory for people to take some learnings away from today. And I love that we're starting with the end in mind. Any great presentation needs to be based on, what do I want to inspire people to do? What do I want them to feel? What do I want them to think? There needs to be a reason why you're doing it. And you start with that reason and work backwards. And I know that we're going to unpack that further, I'm sure, as we go through the conversation today. Having said that, I'd like to wind all the way back to the very start now for a lot of people in the audience. Now, for whatever reason, you can call me a psychopath, a sociopath, whatever you want to call me, Michelle. I've never had stage fright. I don't get nerves. I get excitement and I care about what I'm doing. I stand up on the stage and I really want to do a great job. But for whatever reason, I don't get nerves. And yet we all know, and I'm sure you've had this question 959 times at least, we all know that it's some people's biggest fear. What advice can you give to people out there that are sitting in that category where you can ask them to do anything except for public speaking and they'll be happy, but as soon as you ask them to do that, they start trembling, they get that anxiety? Any thoughts?
Where would I start? Honestly, it's massive, isn't it? Let me start with this. Listen to you. So what you just said then was, I feel excited. I have an adrenaline feeling. I'm pumped, but I don't get nerves. Now, the way I would describe that scientifically is to say to everyone that's listening, it's the exact same physiological experience in your body, whether you are nervous or excited. It's a dumping of adrenaline and endorphins into the system. It's what we call the fight-flight response. And what Mick is doing here is he is saying that feeling that many people listening to this podcast will call nerves, Mick, what you're calling it is excited. So you're you're a coach, so you're reframing that in your mind for it to be more positive. And that's what we all must do. Step one is to recognise that dumping of adrenaline, the thumping heartbeat, the increased body temperature, the flushing of the face, the funny feeling in the tummy, the airheadedness in the brain, the dry mouth. I mean, honestly, there are so many symptoms. No wonder it is people's greatest fear. It really is all the same if you were going on a roller coaster, bungee jumping, or doing something adventurous. And when you pay money to go bungee jumping, you don't say, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, I'm nervous. You say, I'm excited. This is awesome. And then you jump. So it's the same with presenting. You really do need to not say, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, because if you do that, you'll be nervous. If you say, I'm pumped, I'm excited, I'm exhilarated, I'm positive, I'm ready, I'm prepared, I'm alive, whatever word, and your word was excited, then that's really step one to managing the nerves. What I also say is that in my many decades of experience at teaching thousands of people who are terrified of public speaking, it's very fixable. So please do not let another minute go by without trying to resolve this for yourself. Life is too short to be nervous when you communicate with people. And take the steps today, because someone like me can cure you so that you are never nervous again. It's absolutely 100% fixable without pharmaceutical intervention. So some people do take beta blockers to resolve their public speaking nerves. And I just think that's a real shame, because really there's a simpler, less invasive approach to managing your nerves. And that is follow the formulas that great speakers follow. Do some analysis first, get clear on what you're trying to achieve, design your message well, rehearse that message, warm yourself up, warm up your mouth, warm up your body, warm up your mind, and then off you go and deliver. And then the other part to managing your nerves is all about your eye contact. When you look properly at the audience and properly connect with them and make it more about them and less about you, take the focus off yourself, you cease to be aware of those physiological symptoms like the thumping heartbeat, and you end up just being there to serve the audience. I really think in capital letters, people want to write, it's not about me, it's all about the audience. And the more you're truly focused on them and serving them, the less aware you are of yourself, and therefore you won't have an awareness of your nerves. You might still have those physiological symptoms, but you won't have an awareness of them. Yeah, life's too short, right, to have to deal with that every time. Well, a girl came on my training course. She had fainted every 3 months in front of the same group of people.
Wow.
Fainted on the floor. Boom. And we laughed, but it wasn't funny. Her boss rang me and said, if you can't fix her, we're going to have to sack her. And I literally did 4 hours with that girl. That's all I taught her. 4 hours of technical content. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm not I can't work on the brain part of it. A coach like you, Mick, would be better at doing that part of it. I'm just a technical trainer, and I just simply taught this girl how to analyse the audience, work out what she was trying to achieve, think about the design of the message, rehearse the message, and then boom, on her fourth occasion, she got a standing ovation. And now she's gone on to be the vice president of something in New York. So yay to her for putting in the effort. It was only 4 hours with me and some extra effort outside of those coaching sessions, and she'll never be nervous again.
Yeah, well done you and well done her. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm proud of her. And she often contacts me. That was years and years ago now. She often contacts me, and I'm just so proud of her, because she was like a product manager or something like that in a pharmaceutical company. And now she's the vice president of all things clever. So she worked it out, as do many people. If you get rid of that fear, the sky's the limit. Many people just sit in the fear and they don't want to resolve it, and therefore they can't move out of it. And that to me is such a shame. There was a girl that came on my training course, and at the start I asked people, what do you hate about public speaking? That people need to get that off their chest early on. So what do you hate? And she said, honestly, I hate everything about public speaking. And she said, I really don't like anything about it. It's my utter fear. And she said, do you know, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to get on the plane to come to this course. And then once I was in Sydney, Australia, I wasn't sure I was even going to be able to step my foot through the doorway into the training room, because I'm so anxious about being here. And she said, and then she paused, and there was this great silence in the room, that really powerful pause where everyone's waiting for what she said next. And then she said, the reason I'm here is because I am just so sick of other people getting promoted with my ideas. They're stealing my ideas. They're stealing my moment. They're taking my opportunities because I'm letting them, because I'm not the one that speaks up in meetings. I'm not the one that puts myself forward. I've got to learn to overcome this fear so I can go where I'm destined to be. So glad she was there. She just transformed like a caterpillar into a butterfly in that training course, and she has gone again. There's another one that's gone on to just do some really exciting things, be promoted and promoted and promoted. Her life's well ahead of her. It's going to be wonderful for her now.
Oh, well done again, you and her. That's just amazing. And that ability to have the courage to step out of your comfort zone and look at your limiting belief straight in the face and then do something about it. That's really amazing. And to do so authentically, I need to add there as well. It's not about mimicking and just pretending to be someone else. It's about stepping in and challenging that limiting belief and getting past it. And I love what you've said there about the reframing. And I want to add to that too, not just reframing the story you tell yourself in your head. I want to also address that to anyone that's helping others, right? So if someone's getting ready for a speech don't ask them, oh, are you nervous about your speech?
Oh, yes.
Ask,
Hallelujah.
ask them, are you excited about your speech?
Yes.
It's the same question, but frame it in the right way, and they might see what you're seeing, the excitement, right? So, yeah.
And
Really.
also to add even further to that, then also your kids. How many parents say to their kid, are you nervous today? Don't ask that. It's the wrong question. Are you ready? Are you pumped? Are you good? In my family, we call it the funny tummy. And you get the funny tummy before your HSC exams, before your soccer trial, before your whatever it is that you're doing. You know, my kids are basketball players. Before your basketball trial, yes, don't ask, are you nervous? What a dreadful thing to say to a kid.
And that's reflective learning as well, right? The other thing is it can be your whole mindfulness, your presence can also impact that as well. Reflective learning is the classic example of this is the child that goes for their very first swimming lesson. So they go for their first swimming lesson. They take these sideward glances to their parents or their grandparents or whoever took them for the lesson, and they're looking for some kind of signal. And if that signal is happiness, excitement, joy, bang, they're in the pool. If that signal is nervousness and anxiety, that can actually stay with them. That fear of water can stay with them for decades afterwards, right? So it's also about how you position and have your presence as well. Be there to be supportive for that person that might be stepping out of their comfort zone to get up on that stage.
Absolutely. I had a girl that came to me and she said to me, I'm here because for the last 17 years, my parents have been so terrified of public speaking at work that on many occasions they've quit jobs to avoid presenting. And I am here on your course, Michelle, to learn how to get rid of all of that programming that's in my brain from all that terrible modelling that I've had to observe. So, yes, absolutely.
That might be a good time to bring this one in. I'm sure you've heard this question 959 times as well. The debate between someone that's a natural versus a learned behaviour. What are your thoughts about people that are just naturally born charismatic speakers versus no, it's something that you learn over time?
I think you definitely learn it. When I was little, I was very painfully shy, where there are many photographs of me as a little girl hiding behind my mum's lovely legs in the picture. I didn't want to come out, and I definitely didn't want to be in the front for the photo. And then when I was 8, something happened at school. A girl was really nasty to me. She bullied me. And it was at that time I had this amazing emotional intelligence awakening. At the age of 8, I said, right, if I continue with this personality and this approach to life, I am going to continue to be bullied for the rest of my life. This is no good. I need to become more outgoing. I need to be more interested in others. I need to put myself out there. I need to be brave. I need to be bold. I need to be courageous. And I completely transformed my introverted, shy personality into this that you can hear now in this podcast, which is a much more engaging, energetic, enthusiastic kind of a person. And then look at the job. I ended up being a motivational speaker. So yeah, I do think it's learned. And I think because I only have this as my focus, presenting and persuasion, on reflection, I know that I had an awareness I wanted to be good at because I thought I needed to be good at it to get where I wanted to go, even though I didn't really know where I was going, if that makes any sense. So anyone that thinks they're naturally good at it has probably unconsciously decided that this was a skill they wanted to master, and without even realizing has gone studying and watching and observing and learning and growing, and therefore has become what is seemingly natural at it. But I think they've learned it. And that's the good news, right? Anyone can be a great speaker. Anyone can be persuasive. It's just a matter of knowing what are the formulas and following them diligently so that you make them your habit.
So fully agree. And even though I never suffered from the nerves and I always was full of confidence and maybe overconfidence, I still have a learning mindset every time I step on that stage. I come off the stage and I think about what went well, what didn't go well, what would I do differently next time? Not in a self-critical way, in a self-awareness way, learning mindset way. So yes, absolutely, it's something that you learn. I also want to clarify something really important because it can be easy to misinterpret this. And Michelle, if you don't agree with what I'm about to say, full license, just butt in. This is not about not being yourself. It's not about pretending to be someone that you're not. And it's not that introverts can't be amazing orators and presenters. Simon Sinek is an amazing speech giver and he's a well-renowned introvert. So his energy is drawn from being by himself and working in a reflective space. And it's draining for him to stand on the stage. But look at how he delivers. He is amazing. So it's not about, okay, I'm not going to be an introvert anymore. I'm going to be more extroverted. It's not about not being yourself. It's about bringing your authentic self, but learning a skill. And that skill is persuasion and that skill is presentation. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I've got nothing further to add. In fact, what you just said. I really believe that. Yeah. I mean, I say you are gorgeous, so just be you. That's my fast summary of that.
Okay. All right. So you said something really important a while back, and I want to come back to it. You said about connection. Why is connection so important?
There are 4 main approaches to persuasion, and most of us are strong at 2 of them and weaker in 2 of them. Now, why would you care to know your strengths and weaknesses? Well, if the communication scenario requires what is currently your strength, you're just going to talk. Your stakeholder is going to listen, and then they'll agree with whatever it is you've asked them to do. You've been persuasive, and then everyone goes home and gets on with it. And to be honest, neither of you will probably even realise that the 2 of you were in a persuasive moment because it was your strength. So you had the tools in your toolkit, metaphorically, to just say it the way that the person needed to hear it and experience it in order to be persuaded by you, to be convinced by your argument. When the communication scenario requires what is currently your weakness, that means you don't have the skills in your metaphorical toolkit to say it in the way that the person needs to hear it. And we've all had this in our lives where we've had this fantastic idea or a product or a service that we're offering, and we just know that the other person needs it, or we just know it's a good idea, but that person simply cannot hear you explaining why it's good for them. They just don't understand what you're saying. They just can't get it into their head. And you're thinking to yourself after this meeting is over, what was wrong with that person? I was so clear. And I just feel like I was banging my head against a brick wall because it was just so obvious that this was a good idea. Now, so that's why it's good to know your strengths and your weaknesses, unlike you've been talking about being an introvert. So Myers-Briggs tests the 4 main personality filters. There are 50 different filters. When you do the Myers-Briggs, I think often what happens, maybe incorrectly, is people say, well, you're an introvert or you're an extrovert. Good on you. Go forth and love yourself, and just be aware that there's someone who's the opposite to you out there in the world, and just be tolerant and have no judgment about that. With this particular psychometric assessment, which is my tool that I've created with a team of statisticians and psychologists in the UK, you can't really be strong in 2 of them and weaker in 2 of them, because what that means is every time you go to persuade, you have a 50-50 chance of being successful or not. You actually do need to build strength in all 4 approaches. Now, your question was about a connection, and another word for that for me is rapport. One of the 4 approaches is called the Friendly Budgie. And friendly budgies have an innate drive to persuade by establishing goodwill. They need to feel connected to you. They need to know you care about them and their needs. It's the famous saying from Theodore Roosevelt, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And for listeners in America, you would call that a parakeet. In Australia, we call it a budgie, a budgerigar. And in America, it's called a parakeet. It's the bird that you would recognise is probably the most common household pet amongst people that have birds as their pets. The reason we have those birds as our pets is because they're friendly. That's why it's called a friendly budgie. So yes, connection is particularly important if you are presenting to or persuading someone who is the friendly budgie as their highest preference when it comes to hearing information.
So how much of that is related to, first of all, you said showing them how much you care. I love that. How much of it is then knowing who they are and meeting them where they are before you try to shift their thinking?
The whole idea of rapport. So pace them first, be like them first, and then lead them.
Yeah.
And yes, so budgies are characterized by words like warm and caring and genuine and respectful, those kind of words. Budgies are good at things like remembering your name and remembering key details about you. You know, I've got a friend that I live at the beach in Sydney, and I often see this friend every 4 years or something like that. I bump into her and she asks me questions about my children that I don't even remember. She's so good at knowing me. She knows me better than I know me. And gosh, that gives you a nice feeling, doesn't it? When someone firstly remembers your name, secondly says it the correct way, and then maybe even follows up with some piece of information about you that they just recall because they care about you enough to remember that stuff. It's just so lovely. Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. And what I'm also getting there is this feeling of, oh, he gets me or she gets me. And when you feel that, you open up and you're receptive to new ideas when you feel like another person gets you.
Yeah,
and
so our research shows that you do all of that if you are a budgie. But if you are a wise owl, a commanding eagle, or a captivating peacock, you care less about that stuff and more about other things.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
It's the budgies that care about that connection.
And I do want to get to the rest of the smart profile in a moment as well. The other one I feel is, you know, when you've been to those presentations and someone's stood up in front of 7,000 people, 10,000 people, and people are walking away going, oh, I felt they were talking straight to me.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, right? Yeah.
That's it. And budgies are so good at doing that, right? That's their strength. It's to do with the words they're choosing to say. They're reflecting the attitude of that audience member back to them. So that's why you feel like they get you. And the other thing that they're doing, which is so clever, and most people are awful at this, especially in Australia, presenters are awful at this, is the proper eye contact, where it's called direct connected eye contact, where you look right into the white part of your stakeholders' eyes. And when you're presenting to 7,500 people, that is quite some effort to look into the white part of everyone's eye. It's almost like a game that you have to play where you are so diligent at not looking from one to the next, to the next, to the next. I like to say to people, use a star pattern. So you look up to the top right corner, then down to the bottom left corner, and then back up to the top left corner and down to the right corner, sort of a star pattern with your eyes. And when you look at the person, you don't skim their head. You don't stare at their forehead. You don't look over their head at something behind them. You look right into the white part of people's eyes. It's called whites of the eyes eye contact. And it's the number one thing that makes a speaker not just good, it makes them exceptional.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's get into the rest of the profile. So it's called the Persuasion Smart Profile. We've covered the Friendly Budgie.
Yes.
Tell us more about the other three.
Okay, so there's the wise owl, and the wise owl has an innate drive to persuade by establishing message credibility. They care about the logical, analytical, robust argument. So not in the slightest interested in whether or not the person likes you. It's just all about how believable is this message. They love external proof and evidence that you bring in. They love numbers next to their points so that they can follow the logical structure. They love rhetorical questions. So do you know what a rhetorical question is, everyone? It's a question that you ask and then answer.
Well
Boom.
You've got a future in comedy as well, by the way. That was perfect. Well done. I keep going.
So rhetorical questions are really important, not just for you because it helps you remember where you're up to in your message. For a wise owl, it's essential because it helps them to believe in the logic of your message structure. So you might ask, why are we here today? And then answer. And then what is the challenge? And then answer. And how would we solve that? And then answer. And what happens if we don't? Answer. What happens when we do? Answer. So you, with a rhetorical question, you ask it and then you answer it straight away. You give like a micro pause and then answer. So that's the wise owl. The famous saying is, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. Such a good saying. And really, I think owls are, if you think about an owl, so I should just explain, you might be wondering, why do we call this after birds? Because it does tend to, I always am a little bit worried that people are going to think it's pop psychology when we give it a bird name, as if it sort of trivializes it. But when I was trying to work out how to take this very psychologically rigorous model and make it accessible for all people so that in the heat of the moment, you could recognize someone's qualities and know how to adapt or flex so that you gave them what they needed in order to persuade them. How could we do that so that it was easy and fun? And hilariously, these birds' characteristics do ideally map with the characteristics of the types that I've created based on the research into persuasion and influence. So yeah, that's what's called a wise owl. So you think of an owl as an enigmatic, and their flight is silent, and in a work meeting they tend to melt into the background, and you forget that they're even there until they pipe up and say something very intelligent and impressive that gives you a whole other perspective on the matter. In a big conference, you were talking about the 7,500 people in the audience. Owls don't ask questions in big groups like that. Partly because they're risk adverse, but partly also because that they care so much about the robust nature of the argument, they would probably prefer to email the speaker and then get a proper written, robust response from the speaker that did, in fact, address correctly their question. It's the owls in the audience who love when they do ask a question because they become brave in the moment and they pipe up with something. It's the owls that love those dreadful slides in the appendix that have got 500 words at 8-point font and lots of graphs and pie charts. They want the detail. Okay.
All right. So we've got Friendly Budgie. We've got Wise Owl.
Wise Owl. Then there's the Commanding Eagle. So if you think about the eagle has an innate drive to persuade through personal authority. So that means it's not about the message credibility. It's about the person's credibility. So an eagle, as you would know, is commanding eagle. So they tend to command the room. When they walk into the room, they have a presence about them. They stand strong. They talk firmly, speak firmly. They tend to take over what's happening in a meeting. They'll end up being the chair of the meeting even if they weren't the appointed chair. In a big conference, when an eagle asks a question, it's so impressive and insightful, and it belies all this amazing experience that they have that in fact the audience is sitting there going, oh, why isn't this person the speaker? This person should be the one on the stage who's asking this question. They're very impressive and confident and trustworthy. You can follow them because they've got the runs on the board. And I'm sure everyone can think of someone like that in their life who's just very commanding. And then the final one's the captivating peacock. And as you would know, if you've ever seen a peacock fan open its fabulous feathers, peacocks have an innate drive to persuade by establishing enthusiasm and passion for the matter. They have expressive gestures. They are emotional about things. They tell great stories. They're characterized by words like captivating and mesmerizing and memorable and enthusiastic, those kind of words. And very expressive with their hands. In the work meeting, you've got to watch your water glass because they're going to throw their arms around and probably send your water glass flying. They'll tell a story that adds value in the meeting to the matter, like a case study or something like that, so that everyone sits up and goes, oh, wow, that is actually more interesting than I realised. Peacocks are really good at enthusiastically enrolling you into the matter. Yeah, and if you think about peacocks, when they fan open their feathers and they shimmy and they strut and they dance and they say, look at me, I've got to persuade. The most successful peacock gets the prize. The most successful peacock gets to reproduce. So it's in their interest to put everything they've got into the persuasive moment. Yeah, so that's the 4 types. And we tend to have as I said, strong in 2, maybe even 3, and less strong in the 4th one, whichever that might be. So we've all got a different combination of these.
All right. So I'm sure the audience are doing exactly what I'm doing. You're
wondering what you are.
Am I Friendly Budgie? Am I Wise Owl? Am I Commanding Eagle? Am I Captivating Peacock? And I'm thinking situationally, maybe I've played and dabbled in each of those at times. And
one of the things I'll say, because this is a leadership podcast, is that anyone that's got any interest in emotional intelligence who's done the work is probably going to be fairly equal across all four of my bird types.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the people who have not really reflected upon this who end up being radically something.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Okay.
So there was a girl in a training course in a conference that I ran at the beginning of this week, and she was off the scale owl, and none really of the other birds in her. And her manager had sent her along to try and help her to appreciate that not everyone just cares about the data and the research. Some people need you to be enthusiastic about it, or they won't believe. Some people need you to care about them and relate it to them and their needs in order to be persuaded. And then some people need to trust that you are actually an expert in the matter, not just that you can regurgitate the information, but that you understand it and you've maybe used it before, or you've got some sort of experience with it. Yeah, so some people do get a great sort of awakening that there's some work to do. There's a gap. We need to fill the gap.
I think it's also like it's meeting people where they are at the moment as well. And there's also maybe situational, like a captivating peacock may not be appropriate in certain circumstances. Like if it's a very somber topic, for example, a very serious topic, maybe the captivating peacock needs to take a back seat sometimes. How does situation play?
I think that's a good point. And really the thing with the peacock is that their passion can be for the somber moment. In other words, they will be the most somber of all of the somber people. So it's not that they're just sort of airheaded and entertaining all the time. It's that they are very emotionally connected to whatever's going on.
Got it. Okay. That's a great segue to my next question then.
Yeah.
So we do now know a lot more about the science of decision making and the way people process information. So we've known for a long time the power of storytelling and how people remember stories that are wrapped in a way that is relatable, have a point to it, like the story's got a point, so it needs to be kind of simple, organized, relatable storytelling is really powerful. And we now know that people make almost all of their decisions emotionally and justify them rationally. But our brain needs a bit of both of them. So the question I want to ask you is, with our flock of 4 birds that are going to turn up now, does the persuasive speaker need to embody all 4 of those birds at different points in the speech to make sure that the storytelling is captivating, to make sure that there's emotion there for us to latch onto, and that there's rational thought there for us to rationalize what we're going to take away?
Yes, that's the first 3, and then the budgie, right? So you just mentioned the peacock, the owl, and the eagle. And then they also, a great speaker, also got power persuader, does need to also connect, which was your first point. Yeah, that's also equally as important. And it depends a bit on who you're persuading, who's in your audience. So, for example, I have delivered 2 keynotes about the birds where people have assessed themselves before they came, and they were both sales conferences. So lots of budgies, lots and lots and lots of budgies. And it was in a sales in an area where you also had to have a very robust command of the intellectual collateral. So you needed to understand the data. So very high budgie, very high owl, and not much eagle or peacock. And hilariously, in both audiences, 1 peacock in the entire room.
Wow.
And just that peacock is the one that gives everyone a laugh. They just keep everyone listening. They make sure everyone's paying attention and is enthused by the subject. So when it's getting too heavy, they might lift people up with some sort of a humorous comment, or they might tell a story that whips people up and makes them realise how important this really is. So I think it depends by industry as well, and the role you're doing in your job. So you might, if you were assessing yourself, you might come out, this has happened to me. I've assessed myself on many occasions, of course, because I've been testing it as it's been in beta all through the last decade. When I've just done a keynote and I complete the Persuasion Smart Profile, I come out very high peacock because, as you say, I'm supposed to be funny and I tell a lot of jokes and in my speech, and I become a peacock. My friend Warwick Merry, who's the guru of all things online in Australia, says, be yourself amplified when you're on a stage. So definitely I come out higher as a peacock. And then when I have had a day of business development and I do it, I come out way higher on budgie. Yeah. Because, of course, when we're all doing our business development, we've got to be good at connecting with our clients, right? So it is interesting. And it's not a huge variance, to be honest. I'm strong across all four. Obviously, I've done the research and spent a lot of time thinking about this, but it would just slightly tip from mostly being a peacock to mostly being a budgie.
So what I'm taking away here is the need for balance, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm also taking away the situational part. So there'll be situations where one might take a slightly forward step.
That's it.
And then I'm hearing a lot about self-awareness and a learned skill. So if you go through the Persuasion Smart Profile and you do this assessment using the tool, you're going to learn a lot about your strengths and weaknesses across the four birds. And then you can do something about it. It's not just like a lot of people with things like DISC profiles or MBTI, like I spoke about before, they will make excusing behaviors. Oh, that's just because I'm an ENTJ, or that's because I'm a D and an I. No, what I'm hearing here, I'm hearing you do the profile, you look at it, and then go, what are you going to do with that?
Yes, and I will say for people that don't want to do the profile, because not everyone's into that sort of thing, that all of this is covered very thoroughly in the book as well, the How to Persuade book, which is the new book that's coming out on the 1st of August. So here's what I would say. There are 4 steps to being persuasion smart. Step 1 is to know yourself. So work out what you are. And you can assess yourself using the Persuasion Smart Profile, or you can read the book and work that out for yourself. Then step 2 is to work out what is the other person. What is that stakeholder? Is it an audience full of a variety, or is it just one other person that you know you're going to be persuading? And that's as simple as that. And that's why we called them after birds, because I just did think that if you called it a bird, then that would be easier to pick it in the other person. Then step 3 is to build your muscle. It's this growth mindset, build your persuasive muscle so that there are, in fact, this is going to sound like all too hard for your listeners, 40 actions. So 10 actions for each of the 4 birds, 40 actions that we all should be striving to build into our toolkit, our persuasion toolkit. And some of the things, thank goodness, are simple, like remember someone's name, look people in the eye, use rhetorical questions, and laugh more. Some of the things are very simple. And some of the things are mega, a lot of effort, like the 13 linguistic patterns to crafting an owl-oriented message. You know, it's quite complicated. So that's what step 3 is to work out what are all those 40 actions, where are you already good at some of those things, because we'll all be naturally good at many of those 40 actions already. You don't have to learn everything from scratch. You'll be already very good at a lot of that. So what are you already good at? Where are your gaps? And then build your strength where there is a gap. And then step 4 is adapt or flex your approach so that you give the other person what they need. Because hilariously, you're not trying to persuade yourself. And most of us do actually try and persuade the other person in the way that we ourselves would be persuaded. That's not necessarily going to work. That's the whole point of doing a psychometric assessment, to work out what are the options for the other people, because they're probably not the same as you. The people who are like you persuaded them naturally without thinking. You don't need a book or a psychometric assessment for that. It's often when the person is different to you that it's just all too hard, isn't it? And that's why I think it's good to have that awareness to be able to flex or adapt. So is it an owl? Do they need more structure in the way you're speaking? Is it an eagle? Do you have to establish your personal credibility? Do you need to talk a little bit more about yourself so people believe you know what you're talking about? Is it a budgie? Do you need to connect better? Is it a peacock? And do you need to sweep them up and turn on your charm and charisma and be a bit more enthusiastic about this matter? And it's hard to do that off the cuff if you haven't made it your life journey to slowly and surely build the capability around all those 40 actions? Because, we're persuading all the time, even when we don't realize we are. So it's obvious that a business pitch is a presentation or a persuasion moment. And if you have a business pitch, you can mindfully put effort to these 40 actions for that pitch. And I'm also interested in that moment where you're having an argument with your partner about whether, climate change is something we need to think more about in our family, or whether the person that was supposed to deliver the parcel to your front door and took it down to the post office, and now you're trying to get them to deliver it to your house and from the post office. It's all those everyday moments that we have where we're being persuasive, and we don't think of them as persuasive moments. But the stronger you are in all those 40 behaviours, the 40 actions, then the easier all those moments become.
Now 40 does seem daunting. So can I ask you this? Is it a case of more like habit building where you go, okay,
yeah,
I'm going to work on 3 first? And
absolutely. One bite at a time. Absolutely. This week I'm going to try really hard to look people right in the white part of their eye.
Yeah.
Good for me. Leave it at that.
Habituated and then go on to the next one. Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. Right. And then tomorrow is my day where I'm going to use rhetorical questions as headings in my emails. And then under each rhetorical question, I'm going to put a little paragraph of content that resolves the question that I've asked there, and I'm going to bold and underline my headings so that it's really easy for anyone who's an owl to read my email and work out that there's a logical, robust structure to what I'm saying. It's just simple little things like that you just say, right, this is it. And the calendar in the computer is the way to go with this, is to put an alert in there. This is the week where I'm doing this.
You're being very intentional about what you're going to do to build these habits. I wanted to come back to intention anyway, so let's do that now.
Sure.
We started off with the call to action, which I think was brilliant, because that is missing in so many wonderful, what could have been a wonderful persuasive speech, but everyone walks away going, I know I enjoyed that, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it next.
That's it. And I've got research on this. We researched 800 people about the most recent business presentation they went to. Might have been a conference, might have been a meeting. And only 28% of people went back to their desk and did anything with the information they'd heard in the meeting. That means 72% of people went to the meeting, listened or not, and then went back to their desk and did nothing.
Nothing changed. Yeah.
Nothing. Not one thing with the information. Isn't that dreadful? So it tells us we're going to too many meetings that are at best boring, at worst a complete waste of our time. And I just would love to encourage everyone who's ever communicating to anyone to just not be that person that's in that 72%. And if you're in a meeting where the speaker hasn't been clear about what they want you to do, ask before you leave. There's a responsibility on the presenter, of course, but if they're no good and they haven't done it, then maybe you take responsibility and ask, so what do you want us to do with this information today? And let's make this meeting useful.
Yeah, nice one. I'm not surprised at those stats, I have to say, Michelle. But thank you for sharing those. I'm not surprised at all. So everyone, here's your first call to action from this podcast. Develop a call to action in your presentations. There we go.
Yes, please do.
So that's being intentional about what you want them to do. What about what you want them to think and what you want them to feel? How do you build that in?
I take a strategic approach to the teaching of presentation skills. I think that there are 3 phases, and this is not rocket science, so I'm sure you all know this. Phase 1 is the analysis phase, where you work out, what am I trying to achieve as the presenter or the persuader? And what do I want my stakeholder or my audience to do at the end of this? And phase 2 is the design phase, where you put the words you're going to say together and any supplementary material like slides or handouts or leave behinds. And then the 3rd phase is the delivery phase. In the analysis process, there's this really great model that you've referred to a couple of times, Mick, called the think, feel, do model. What is my audience thinking? What are they feeling? And what are they doing before I talk? And then that's their current state. And then the desired state is, what do I want them to think and feel and do when they leave? And I really think it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It's just as simple as that. Ask yourself those questions. So, for example, one of my CEOs talks a lot about climate change. So what do they think? They think that he's a zealot. They think that he's unrealistically passionate about the matter. Some people think that he's a fantastic role model for climate change. and other people think that he's in way too deep and can't see the wood for the trees. He's too much of almost religious about his climate change approach. What do they feel about that? Well, they feel threatened by him a lot of the time. Some people feel enthusiastic and inspired by him and his passion for the matter. Some people feel stressed because it means more work for them if what he's saying is right. Some people feel overwhelmed by just the impossible nature of climate change and how to solve it. What are they doing? Well, a lot of people in his meetings, because he's the CEO, are sitting up politely, listening beautifully, not having devices at the ready, and just giving him their proper full attention and participation. Every now and again, he gets the odd sassy comment from someone who's trying to be a bit controversial and stand out for possibly the wrong reasons in his meetings. So that's the think, feel, do. Then what do I want them to think? Well, I want them to think climate change is real, that they have a role to play, that I know what I'm talking about, that this is something that's urgent, we've got to do it now. How do I want them to feel? I want them to feel empowered and compelled to take the action that I'm suggesting. And I want them to trust me and believe in me. And I want them to feel excited that it's doable. The part they need to play is achievable. And then what do I want them to do? Take action when they leave the meeting, go forth and follow the 5 steps, or do this thing with the recycle, or grow their vegetables, or whatever it is they're going to do to help with climate change. It's the actions. Yeah, so there you go. What are they thinking, feeling and doing before I talk? And what do I want them to be thinking, feeling and doing once I'm done?
All right, wonderful. I love it. And very actionable. So I hope everyone was taking lots of notes there. That's exactly what we do in those different phases. Okay, now this one might be pretty challenging. Let's see. What can you do in persuasion when you can sense there's an element of confirmation bias going on? Dangerous ground, but I'm going to go with politics, right? And you see it, and most of our audience is in the US, but you see this in Australia as well.
Sure.
You see very divisive, or Philippines had a recent election where this was horrible.
Yeah.
You get very divisive situations where people will just listen to the same information and they will either dismiss it or agree with it, depending on whether it agrees with a predetermined viewpoint that they've already achieved. So Republicans versus Democrats. Here in the Philippines, it was about Bongbong Marcos versus Lenny, right? So and they just, whatever was being said, they looked through a lens that would either confirm what they already believe or ignore anything that was contrary information. What do you do in that situation?
Good question. So this is what I think, that there's part of the Persuasion Smart Profile is an assessment on your predisposition to persuade. And this is the first step to the answer to your question. Some people have a very high predisposition to persuade. It's their care factor. They are driven to change your mind. So if you say that Democrat is better, Republican is better, and they think the other, they are just driven to try to change your mind about your preconceived ideas. Others of us have a very low predisposition to persuade. So you'll say you're, for example, a Republican, and I say I'm a Democrat, just to use an example. I live in Australia, so I'm not one or the other. So a low predisposition is, well, I'm glad that you're a Republican and I'm glad that I'm a Democrat, and you can think what you like and I think what I like, and good on you. I have no drive to change your mind to my political party. So that's the first thing that sometimes I think, and I should say that your predisposition to persuade has nothing to do with how persuasive you are either. I have, for example, an extraordinarily high predisposition to persuade. I am driven to change most people's minds about most things if I think they're wrong. But that doesn't mean I'm the most persuasive person in the room. My husband's predisposition to persuade is incredibly low. And he's also a wise owl, which means he's naturally reserved and thoughtful and analytical about a matter. At a dinner party, I'm funny and everyone will love talking with me, and we'll all have a great night. And my husband probably won't talk very much. He almost melts into the walls at the dinner party. But when he does speak, it's like you could hear a pin drop in the room, because he's a wise owl. So when he speaks, he says something very meaningful.
Mm.
And he's likely even to cut through that confirmation bias with his 4 sentences that he said all night that might even wake people slightly up to changing their minds. He's not going to change their mind that night, but they might rethink their perspective on it because he was so insightful and so undeniable in the way he expressed his opinion. But his predisposition is very low. So if you then don't change your mind after he said whatever he said, he's not going to go chasing after you to try and change your mind. Yeah, so I think, and the other thing is also that the conversation about manipulation, which we haven't had today, the difference between I'm very tired of talking about manipulation and persuasion because I've just written a book and it's the most commonly asked question, but it does sort of answer your question that there are 5 main ways we go about influencing people. 2 of the ways, imagine a continuum, 2 of the ways that we go about influencing people are the aggressive approaches. They're called forcing and directing. 2 of the ways that we go about influencing people are passive. They're called modeling and guiding. And then there's the assertive approach in the middle, that's persuasion. So it is actually impossible to be simultaneously persuasive and manipulative in the moment. You can either be assertive and therefore persuasive, or you've shifted out of that assertive approach into either the aggressive or the passive approach to manipulate the person to do what you want. And I think what happens it's now no longer persuasion. When you're talking about something that's like a religious belief or a political belief, something that is long held, in order to change that person's mind, you're not getting a win-win there.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a win-lose to that situation. And I think what you're doing is moving into either that aggressive or that passive approach to really manipulate that person to think the way you think. Yeah. And who says that what you think's right? do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I haven't really answered your question. I've kind of answered it.
You have it. I think it comes down to then intent as well and what you do with that. And yeah, very good.
That word intent, gosh, I'm sure you talk about that a lot in this podcast. Okay. It's just so important. Yeah, if your intent is to persuade someone to do something that isn't in their best interest and that they don't really want to do, you're using the word persuade incorrectly. Your intent is not to persuade. Your intent is to coerce. Or manipulate or force or direct or guilt your stakeholder, which is the passive approach, into something that isn't in their best interest. And gosh, it's a minefield, isn't it, this conversation? I do think you're right when you say the word intent. It's really about that. I'll give you a quick example. My 17-year-old daughter is terrible at picking up her bath towel and it gets all smelly and gross on the floor. Now, is it manipulation when, as the mother, I ask her to hang it up? She doesn't care it's smelly and wet. She doesn't want to pick it up. She's way too busy to care less about a bath towel, and she knows anyway that I'll probably pick it up if she doesn't. So am I actually, this is the question for everyone to ponder upon, am I manipulating her when I ask her to pick it up? I say no, because I think that it's in her interest to have a dry towel in the bathroom after the shower, because then she can dry herself quickly and get on with what's important in her life. And it's not so much that I don't want to pick it up or that I don't really want to have to wash it too often. It's more that I just know she'll save time if she's got the towel in the bathroom and it's dry because it's been hanging there for 24 hours since the last shower. So in that situation, I feel like it's a win-win if she hangs up the towel. I feel like she gets the dry towel and can get on with what she's doing, and I don't have to pick it up either or wash it. So intent.
There's been so many great things here today, Michelle, and I knew it was going to be great when we first met each other. This has been a really rich conversation. You've brought something new and interesting to the table for our audience.
Oh, thanks.
That we can all go away and act on.
Action. Yay.
So I want to go now to our rapid round and close us out. So the first one I'm going to ask you, Michelle, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
That life would turn out okay.
Yeah, good. No, I think we all need to hear that sometimes. Very good. What's your favourite book?
Oh, my favourite book is by Stephanie Dowrick, and it's called Choosing Happiness. It's
Nice.
the most gorgeous book I've ever read in my life, and I read it all the time.
I just love that it was right next to you when
Yeah.
I asked you the question. Amazing. Okay, what's your favorite quote?
I should say my favorite book is How to Persuade, shouldn't I? The one I wrote, but I didn't. Oops. My favorite quote comes out of this book. Can I read it to you?
Yes, please.
It's such a beautiful quote. It's slightly long. I'll try and read it quickly. Whatever our background, culture, or race, what rewards us most powerfully and consistently are the most deceptively simple abilities of all. The ability to be kind, to live enthusiastically and creatively, to appreciate and understand experiences different from our own, and to sustain a sense of inner stability and trust, even in unwelcome and difficult situations.
Wow.
What a great quote for this podcast, don't you think?
That's perfect. That's exactly why we exist.
Yeah,
love it.
that's it.
And finally, and hint, here's the call to action. If people want to know more about you, Michelle, they want to know more about your organization, the Persuasion Smart Profile, the book, how do they get in contact with you?
My website is www.michellebowden.com.au. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Michelle Bowden. You'll see me right there. And I'd love to connect with you and chat about how I might help you.
Brilliant, Michelle. And I encourage you all to do so. I've learned a lot today about these 4 birds, I'm going to call it, the Persuasion Smart Profile. It's got me thinking, and you know that I've got a learning mindset. When I go into my next set of presentations, I was already doing that intent model around think, do, and feel. But now I'm going to be going, who am I showing up as? Am I showing up as a friendly budgie? Am I showing up as a wise owl? Am I showing up as a commanding eagle? Am I going to be captivating peacock? What am I going to do? And how am I going to balance those characters towards what I want people to think, do, and act? All right. Think, feel, and act. Sorry. Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your time today. I know that went quite long, but the content was so rich. In fact, I've got another 70 questions I could ask you. I feel like we could go
Let's chat again sometime.
But let's call it a quits on this one now. And I'd love to have you back for a part 2 for sure. Wonderful.
It's just been so great chatting from my point of view as well. Enjoy.
Today's episode was brought to you by my new book, You're a Leader, Now What? The Proven Path to High Performance Leadership. The book contains many of the great lessons that we've learned together here on the Leadership Project podcast, together with lessons that I've collected over my 30-year career as a leader. The book is aimed towards first-time leaders, but really there's something in there for everyone. If you would like to show your appreciation for this show, we would greatly appreciate if you were able to go and get your copy of the book on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback, and if you could leave us an honest review on Amazon. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Project podcast at mixbeers.com. A big call out to Faris Sadek for his sound design and editing of our audio and video content, and to the whole team at TLP, Joanne Gozon, Gerald Calabo, Rika Vidanes, and my wonderful supportive wife, Say Spears, who is also our operations manager. This show would simply not be possible without you. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts. You can catch the video podcast and our video of the week at the Leadership Project YouTube channel, and you can join the conversation at the Leadership Project Facebook community group. We look forward to bringing you more great content and interviews next week as we continue to learn together and lead together. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.